The conversation of mental health and the tolerance towards such is not only very important, but also substantial to how we provide patience and awareness of how one another feels. It's no question that the acknowledgement of mental health has been more prevalent in today's era more than ever, bringing a new wave of education and mutual love. Except there seems to be a blockade when it comes to the conversation of fame, creation, and simply disliking a person. Suddenly, the plot of mental health is lost, and we lose perception of what we claim to be so tolerant of. If one is struggling, we pay more attention to the fact of the platform instead of the human behind the mask.
How many of you know someone close to you who has suffered or is suffering with, in some way, their mental health? Just give me a quick indication. Wow. Pretty much every hand went up.
Mental health is something my generation has made an immense focus. The idea of managing our psyche and how we feel is very important, as our feelings and our brains carry us in day-to-day life. The willingness to discuss and be open towards the idea of mental health issues have been made widely known, and it's no longer a foreign entity, or something to fear. A majority of people nowadays have become much more educated on how their brain and emotions work in comparison to people prior to the 2000s. You see, the conversation of our mind used to be a bit more taboo. It wasn't until the 70s really that people started to spread the message and really make treatments more known about you and others. There were movements that transcended the 70s and 80s to assist in catapulting this worldwide message. NAMI worked to make it more well known. In the 90s, the National Alliance of Mental Illness lashed out battles against companies and public outlets for their harmful portrayal of mental illness. And with time, networks and foundations like these help minimize the stigma. What was seen as something outcasted, shunned, and never to be spoken of has become one of the most aware issues with all human beings in the past 25 years. The research into what makes our brains tick and how we could be different required a different type of prowess, one that is now widely known to everyone. So since my generation and the development of the one before it have worked so hard to become more tolerant of our emotional and mental issues, it leads us to today, where we seem to drop the ball and count differences to the ones we may see as inhuman or quote above us. Musicians, outward celebrities, internet content creators, network entertainers, the list can go on as long as I could possibly make it. Those who have a platform and possess a certain amount of fame are, from time to time, seen as somebody not like us. Somebody different, and there's a habit that has grown of not realizing these issues that someone seen as quote normal, or however we define normal, can have. This goes for the same as the one on the stage or on the screen. To give examples of celebrities and current issues that have had outward intolerance, there is Chaperone. Chaperone is diagnosed with severe depression and has had history of being fearful of her superfans and stalkers. In this scenario, she set boundaries with the public but got ridiculed for being ungrateful to her fans. Another example is Andrew Luck, a former quarterback in the NFL who retired early due to injuries and the mental toll of being an elite quarterback and his feelings of loneliness. His treatment from the fans were so bad that they even booed him in his last public appearance. The media outlet said the fans were justified in booing a man who spent his entire career taking constant hits from 300-pound defenders, and they ridiculed him for wanting to retire. Another example would be Ariana Grande, who has been attacked many times by both fans and the media. With the tragic passing of Mac Miller 6 years ago, many fans of the rapper used it as an excuse to blame the celebrity who was grieving his death as well. The pain they felt was no excuse to lash out on her because, well, they lacked any sort of information on what actually happened or how this celebrity felt. They assumed his feelings and then went with and lashed out against someone who was close to the celebrity. With the instances, it feels like a lot of people go backwards with their so-called tolerance depending on how they feel or with a natural bias. Guys, we need to be more aware of mental health issues and what people could be experiencing. We need to start taking things more seriously. Please be more tolerant. Kill yourself! While people claim they're pro-mental health, but then they treat a victim like shit when they show suffering to signs of mental duress, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. The people who need the help the most aren't gonna look correct or act right. Mental health can make you act differently in what may be considered inappropriate or out of the norm. You can choose not to support them, but demonizing someone for their mental health and their issues is a major flaw that speaks on if you're actually pro-mental health awareness. These are human beings despite all the glitz and the glamour, and I believe it is far more effective to examine how our culture treats them as a whole, rather than to nitpick and examine people on an individual basis. If we take the background of celebrities/content creators and utilize their history of mental health breakdowns, we can dissect how both fans and critics alike have either ignored or encouraged their own self-destructive behaviors. We can examine how celebrities are dehumanized by their fans and encouraged to engage in self-destructive behavior for the sake of their fame, like for drug usage, overworked on tours, as well as specific celebrities whose fan base have encouraged them to make bad decisions for entertainment. On the other end of the spectrum, we can examine how critics of many artists can oftentimes forget the humans behind the pieces they so quickly bash. This can be how Britney Spears and Isaiah Rashad were treated by critics during their times of mental crisis. Mental health with big figures can very quickly be turned into a comedic stand, constantly. And don't get it twisted. I sense a criticism or a comment that goes along the lines about how I sympathize with the powerful, or how I'm trying to kiss ass. If I wanted to kiss ass, I would just kiss ass. So I'd like to say, no matter if somebody is problematic or not, or if I give a damn about their product, these standards are something I constantly stand by. We do not alienate our empathetic standards of basic decency because you don't like somebody's album or because they said something a little fucked up. Because with celebrities, think of Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm Glad My Mom Died. A blunt, tragic yet beautifully profound memoir about one of our generation's most iconic child actresses. Her story was well received, especially with people being extra sensitive about the Dan Schneider case, and she was embraced by the public. I mean, well, as she should be. So why is it that culturally our awareness is so subjective on when to stand for things? How come celebrity crimes and mental health can turn into a joke? Well, a perfect example of this would be the Caretakers 2016 project Everywhere at the End of Time, which is a 6.5-hour long album that is 6 parts long that cover the horrors of dementia. The album is deeply personal to many who have relatives who suffer from such a scary disease, yet when the art piece started to garner mainstream attention in around 2019, it was treated more as a challenge rather than something to think about. People saw the length of the project and premise and thought it was a silly internet album. And this is many such cases of artists' most personal works being used as memes or even being made fun of constantly. Kid Cudi dropped his infamous Speed and Bullet to Heaven album in 2016, and it received universal backlash and hate from fans and critics alike. The album, though, was a clear cry for help, and I would say some critics rated him far too harshly on a personal level. How someone can hear a song about finding your father dead and living with trauma and calling it boring and annoying goes beyond any musical criticism, but is instead an attack on his life. This ties back to the hypocrisy of earlier, where we scream about how important mental health tolerance is and how we need to be more kind, more aware. Yet in cases like this, the popcorn is thrown and a subject matter can be turned into the butt of a joke. And it is of my opinion that critics should be mindful of the subject matter of the music they review. Oftentimes these raw, more emotional projects aren't meant to be pretty, and if you wish to criticize such things, I believe you should approach the art as humanly as possible. It would be like if you had someone criticize the shading on a vent piece or calling it stupid, just blunt. And period. On the flip side, artists who are in good headspaces can also be made fun of and ridiculed in a way that is mentally intolerant, so both streets can go the same way. Chance the Rapper dropped The Big Day in 2019, and to universal backlash, nobody liked this album, and even the fans were telling him his music was better when he was on drugs. Which, I'm gonna just stop yapping for a second. Think about that. Would you tell your friend they were better when they were a drug addict? People dehumanize artists for the sake of their own entertainment oftentimes, and that stigma can hurt people who relate to the artist's struggles. Hell, the conversation about music struggle can even rise with a controversial figure such as Kanye West. Now listen, controversial for his statements in the past few years, he's one of the biggest musicians of this generation who has very openly struggled with mental illness and issues of that nature, even to the point of very open cries for help. At times they've been turned into jokes. Hell, a song that was made as a note to leave this world was then begged to be dropped even if the quote consequences would happen. Why do we not take these things as seriously as they're presented? Having a very open breakdown as the result of a mental illness while also going through tragic loss and tens of millions of people are watching it and criticizing it, I mean, fuck. I mean, you'd go a little mad too, right? It seems like we constantly recycle habits of being tone deaf and cruel in return for a different form of entertainment. This man you see on the screen can have the same mentality as your neighbor. I feel like the platform and the celebrity status is what truly creates this issue. From the warped perception of the viewer to being a figure that has to worry about constantly being watched or criticized, in no way can it be an easy lifestyle to deal with. Could you imagine yourself in the shoes where everything you've ever done is broadcasted all the time? And sure, the criticism can be made that, hey, they signed up for that life, but that doesn't excuse the utmost harsh and cruel behaviors, which calls back to Chaperone. We've seen what a platform can do to children. Examples such as child stars of big YouTube channels or children who grew up in the spotlight like Macaulay Culkin and Jake Lloyd. It's a different lifestyle, and while people may sign up for fame and riches, they do not sign up to be on the verge of death. This criticism especially does not apply to children or to those who randomly gain an immense spotlight. If there's a contract that in bold letters tells you your disorder will become a viral joke, or you'll never be human again, I don't think the signature will be completed on that paper as much as it is. Growing up or developing under that light especially will fuck you up. For life. Your frontal lobe wasn't even close to completion, yet you were allowed to be dealt in conversation by every person who bats an eye. To me, a spotlight is irrelevant. At the end of the day, these people are still brushing their teeth and going to get groceries the morning after. These are key words that are often forgotten when your perception of somebody is so taboo and put into a different realm. In a lot of scenarios, this can be connected to parasociality and how celebrity culture is treated as a whole. But whether it be illnesses or open struggle, they are the same as you can experience. They are the same limelight that your friend, family member, or neighbor can go through. The major warp in your eyes is that you saw this person while sitting in nosebleed seats.
Anything else?
No, I think I'm about finished. The conversation of our mental health is a topic that should be taught to all. Being more aware of how we feel, how our brains crack, and what the thought process could be is nothing short of dire. From those who suffer with illnesses to those who sit in the chairs of psychologists, it's important to spread those messages and continue to learn how we work, so we can work better. A screen or a number count does not register somebody else as inhuman. As difficult as it is to believe, the financial or imaginary pedestal somebody is placed on does not change them from being a person. And we should keep this sentiment as always. No matter the platform, the message, or who we're talking about, mental health is all the same, platform or not. Holding this candle forever and always is something we should all do if we claim to be so tolerant of those who suffer, as well as if we claim to care so much about healing and education. But you don't want to hear me. You just want to dance. Thank you to my patrons, Lucy, Yosarian, and Mimi Diggs. I'll see y'all next time.